Hey, welcome back. This is the second video in this series, Learning the Soundboard here at the church. And you know, in that first video, we went through how to get everything turned on, how to get the right scene loaded up for the particular worship team that's leading that morning. And in this video, we're going to figure out how do we dial in some of the volumes for that worship team so that it sounds real crisp and clear. Because what ends up happening is we have a default template for each worship team, but when that worship team goes up that morning and starts playing, starts practicing, you know, some mornings the worship leader, their throat might be a little bit sore and they're singing quieter. Some are singing a little bit closer to the mic that morning. Some just got brand new strings on their guitar. You know, there's all sorts of little nuances and details that you can adjust just to dial in the overall sound a little bit better for that Sunday morning. We're going to figure that out together. Now, before we can fully dial in the sound of a particular worship team, we need to start by just learning the basics of this soundboard, where things are at. So on this half of the soundboard, or 2/3 of the soundboard, you will find inputs, the individual channel inputs. Then on this segment of the soundboard, you will find outputs, or places that those inputs are being routed to and sent. So outputs, inputs, basic way to think about it. Now, on the inputs segment, you'll notice that you'll only see the first 16 channels of inputs going in. And as sound is coming in those inputs, you can see there's little level meters that are bouncing up and down. You know you're getting some sound in. But how do we get to the second 16 or 17 through 32? That's the second layer down here, 17 through 32. So we can see our next 16 channels of inputs. Now, each one of these individual channels corresponds to a physical plug that's being plugged in from the stage, either into a sound box that's in the back or literally into the back of the soundboard. So there you go. You have your first 32, first 16 here. You can get to your second 16 channels here. And this third layer down is the auxiliary input. So this particular area, this is where you would find the PC, the computer, where its volume meter is in. If you're playing a video, for example, this is how you could turn up and down that video. Now you'll notice that this is in stereo. These two faders are connected, a left and a right, so it's two inputs, left and right. And then if you go back to these other inputs, many of these are going to be mono, a single channel input. The piano happens to be stereo, so we have a left and a right for the piano that we can turn up and down, and they're connected. So as you're adjusting input volumes up and down, I can adjust a particular instrument. So for example, I could adjust the piano. Say the piano's way too loud on this mix that we're playing. I can turn up the volume so you can hear it a bit. I can turn down and completely remove the piano, or add a lot more piano if I want to hear more. But what you can do is turn up and down the individual instruments. I can turn up and down the bass. I can adjust, this is my speaking mic. I can turn up and down. This is Joe's speaking mic. So you can adjust the individual volumes for different instruments. If for some reason the drums are way too loud, that never happens, right? You could turn down the drums, or you could turn up the drums if they're playing a little bit softer on that particular Sunday. So that's how you can adjust particular individual channels of inputs. Now, one final note on adjusting the volumes of the individual channels. You might notice that I can turn up and down some of the channels and the volume's not adjusting, and that's because that channel has been muted. So you can mute and unmute the channel by just pressing that big red button. If someone forgets, and this happens sometimes. For example, one of the musicians accidentally leaves their microphone on while they're, for say, example, doing the sermon message. You might hear some odd ringing noise, some feedback noises happening depending on where the location they left that microphone. It'll start picking up some of the ambient room noise and start giving a little bit of feedback, little rings here and there. I would always go and check and see if there's a signal coming through one of those wireless handheld microphones, and if they accidentally left it on while they're doing the sermon, for example, I could mute it and get rid of that ringing noise. Now there's a few more things you might need to know to dial in the sound on a Sunday morning. One of those things is to know how to turn the reverb or the effects off of the microphones for those up on the stage who are singing. So to adjust the reverb on the microphones, or some of those effects on the microphone, you can go over to this output segment of the soundboard, and you will go down to the bus 9 through 16 that you see here, and you will see these purple channels, and these have the reverb effects on them. So there's a lead reverb, there's a pickup reverb, and these two reverb channels, you can adjust them both at the same time if you want to. The pickup is usually adjusting some of the reverb on the instruments that are going into this particular channel. And this one is adjusting the vocals, the lead vocals that are going into this channel. So you can adjust up and down how much reverb sound there is coming into those microphones. Now you might not be familiar with what that reverb sounds like, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of an audible example. If we take our volume up a little bit so you can start hearing it. Here's the vocals with no reverb. There's a lot of reverb. So that reverb adds an echo effect, some of those different layers in there. And so for that effect, what ends up happening is at the very closing of the service, if the worship leader goes up and says, "Hey, have a wonderful day, you're dismissed," and that reverb is turned up, it'll sound really echoey. It'll have kind of a weird sound because that reverb's set up for singing. And so you can turn that reverb up and down with this dial, or you can just straight up mute them, just like that, and it'll remove that reverb if they start talking through the mic. Now, only the singing mics have reverb on them. You don't have to worry about the sermon mics. We don't have it. That wouldn't make sense. There's no reverb on the speaking mics. All right, the final step to dial in a Sunday morning is to know how to adjust the monitors on the stage for the singers. Now, oftentimes we'll adjust the monitors during the warm-up time of that worship time, so a little bit earlier in the morning when the time's warming up. And those monitors are going to be on the output segment of the soundboard. And so if you go down to bus 1 through 8, you'll see on bus 1 and 2, this wedge left, wedge right, those are those wedge speakers up on the stage. And they're set up on two different zones, the left and the right. And so you've got a volume meter for the left side and a volume, or left side over here, left and right, the left side, and then a volume meter for the right side. And so you can turn up the overall volume of the monitors up and down. Now, the other thing that they might ask you to do on a Sunday morning is to adjust the mix that is going into those monitors. And so just like we can adjust volumes for the overall house mix by turning up and down different channels, right? We can adjust how much volume there is of each individual channel going into those main speakers. We can adjust the volume that's coming out of those monitors, the actual mix of those monitors of individual instruments. And so to do that, we would select one of these monitors with these select keys. And then we would use this button that says Sends on Fader. We want to change what is being sent to that fader right there that we've selected. And so we'll click Sends on Fader. And you'll notice that when we click Sends on Fader, it adjusts some of the mix that's happening over here on the left side, these inputs. Because once that's flashing, we are now adjusting the individual volume of instruments that are going into those left wedges. And we can go through the different layers of the soundboard. And so, for example, they might say, for this particular mix, hey, we want to hear more acoustic guitar on that left side. And so as long as that's flashing, you can turn up the acoustic guitar that's being sent to that left monitor. And then all you'll do is to click that Sends on Fader one more time, and it'll reset to the overall house mix. So you can adjust volumes that are coming through the main auditorium speakers. If you wanted to adjust the volume mix for the right wedge, well, then you'd select the right, Sends on Fader, and then you can adjust the individual mix on the channels. Hey, we need a little less piano on the right side. Oh, okay. But we want more drums on the right. Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that. I can turn up the drums going into that right wedge, and I can turn down the piano. Pretty simple and straightforward, but the big thing to know is to hit that select key on which one of these individual wedges you want to adjust, the volume, the mix going into, sends on fader, adjust the volume, turn that off, and then you can do the overall volume coming out of those speakers, the mix coming out of those speakers. And there you go. That's all you need to customize some of those and dial in some of those sounds on a Sunday morning for a particular worship team. Now the next videos will take it one step further if you're feeling like you want to dig a little bit further into the soundboard, but you're already pretty well equipped to start running on a Sunday morning.